And our guest for this evening is Dr. Nadia Ali. She's been with us before, so we are glad to have her back. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for our guest or our co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. You can also text any questions or comments to 437-778-3299. If there is any information at all that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, your faith organizations, any local organizations, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. And with that, Jen, if you would take a moment and greet our listeners and viewers on tonight.
Absolutely. I was about to say good evening, Love Bay. For me, it is very early morning. So good morning to maybe people who are in my part of the world right now. It's good to be back on Suffering in Silence. If you have not heard my background before, I am one of the co-hosts on Suffering in Silence. I am a survivor of domestic violence myself, and have been an advocate for almost 10 years. So, and have been working alongside Tia for the past several years. So super happy to be doing this work with her. Alongside her. I also have my own program called The Human Experience that is about our stories and how what we walk through in life shapes who we become. So if you want to check out those stories or just learn more, you can always visit my website, thehxpod.com.
Thank you so much. And with that, Dr. Nadia, if you would greet our listeners and viewers.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Nadia Ali. I'm actually grateful to Minister Tia and Jennifer for inviting me here. And I'm a functional physician, which may not necessarily be something that all of you might be aware of, but functional medicine is a form of medicine where you try to understand the root cause of a disease. And instead of patching the problem with a Band-Aid like a medication, or an invasive procedure, you want to try and reverse it by addressing the root cause. And I'm also a mindfulness coach, which brings me into the area of mental health. And that is my connection into, the world of trauma or domestic violence.
Yes. But thank you so much. So as usual, we want to start with sharing some resources, and then I am going to turn this right over to Jen. Again, if you would like to support us in our organization, which is Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc., you can visit our GoFundMe page. If you go to GoFundMe, you can look for Rise Out of the Ashes and you can make a donation. You can write a check, write it out to Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc., and you can send that to P.O. Box 15, Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. The zip is 19026. And at the top of our list, what we are working on is our rapid funding, our immediate and emergency funding. We help individuals dealing with issues of domestic violence by supporting them financially. We support them with transportation, with getting, helping them with relocation, with purchasing medicine, toiletries, all of those things that you would need in an emergency that we sometimes take for granted because we have so much access to it. We financially support those. So if you would like to help us do that, please do. I want to share Pastor Darius Daniels. He's a pastor of Change Church. There are several locations in the United States. His website is dariusdaniels.com and his YouTube channel is Darius Daniels TV. In the United States, we have the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Their website is thehotline.org. Their phone number is 1-800-799-7233. Also in the United States, we have the National Helpline for Substance Abuse Mental Health Services. Their number is 800-662-4357. In the UK, we have the National Domestic Abuse Hotline. Their website is nationaldahelpline.org.uk, and their phone number is 080820 00247, or you can visit Women's Aid, and their website is womensaid.org.uk. And lastly, I want to share the Befrienders Volunteer Action to Prevent Suicide. You can go to this website and you can find a helpline by the country which you live in, and their website is befrienders.org. And just a reminder, listeners, wherever you live, you can search for resources according to your country, your state. I mean, you can start nationally and then pull the search in closer locally to where you are. So no matter where you are, there are resources, and we want to encourage you to look for them, to find them. And we still want to encourage you all to send us your resources so we can share them. And again, our topic on tonight is cultivating calm, empowering the mind and spirit. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jen.
Great. Well, Dr. Nadia, thank you so much for being with us again and continuing to come back and share on the show. I love, as I was sharing with you before we started, I just recently started exploring functional medicine for my own personal well-being, and have really enjoyed the experience of it, and understanding that functional medicine aims to get at the root cause of the issue, as you already explained. So when we talk about health, we have a very, I guess, singular view sometimes when we talk about it, right? Where it's like, it's just physical, it's just mental, it's, and we compartmentalize all of these things. So what do you, like, how do you explain to people the fact that it's all intertwined, and that it all, your mind, body, spirit, it all affects the other? How do you kind of introduce that concept to somebody that maybe doesn't have experience with that?
So that's an excellent question, right? Because the beginning of the problem is how you define the problem, right? If you define the problem in the wrong way, there is no way you're going to get to the solution, So we have research which shows that 70% of visits to primary care physician is actually related to mental health issues. But they are not going to present with anxiety and depression. They will present with headache, migraine, high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, recurrent infections, hormonal imbalances. And so when they will present, they think it's a physical problem. The physician thinks it's a physical problem. So everybody then goes into figuring out, okay, what are we going to do about it? So what should we do? Should we give an antibiotic? Should we give an over-the-counter pain medication? Should we do a CAT scan? Should we do an MRI? So everybody is defining this problem as physical. So of course, solution they're going to seek out will be physical solution, something to band-aid the situation, right? Something to resolve the symptoms. But if you look at what we are made up of, we are 99% energy. So if we are 1% matter, so if you look into matter, so what's matter made up of? Okay, it's molecules. Molecules made up of like the electrons and the neutrons. And so basically, these particles are not really mass, they're primarily energy. And so if we are 99% energy, how is it possible that all of what we are presenting as is physical with 1% matter, right? And so I think that the issue that we have right now is, how do we define health? Because right now we are in what we call the sick model of care. So there'll be a lot of people who will say, I was very healthy till I had the heart attack. Not too sure about that. So you ask them, so what do you mean by that? So they will tell you, look, I was eating well and I was doing physical activity and I was going to work and I didn't have any issues. That is not the definition of health. It simply means, so you could be actually in a survival mode, right? You are so busy, you're so occupied, you don't even know what's going on, right? And a lot of times people will brush off symptoms. Oh, I have a headache, I'll just take over-the-counter medication. Oh, I have some reflux. Maybe I'll take some Tums. So there is no time for us to sit and say, oh, you know what? My body is telling me something. What is my body telling me? You will go through it because you have to get things done. And then you say you're very healthy. I mean, how can you be healthy, if you're having all of these symptoms and somehow you've taken something to take care of it? Right? And so when we think of health, we think that there is no sickness. I'm not sick. I don't have a medical problem. So I am healthy. This is the definition of health that we use, which is why we have 1 in 3 people in this country who have a chronic disease, because this is the model that we follow. And so if you look at WHO, World Health Organization, defines health not as absence of disease, but it talks about optimal physical, spiritual, and emotional health. And again, there is a problem. That's exactly what you referred to, that it categorizes things into physical as if there are different boxes that you can put things in, not realizing that optimal health requires a couple of things. The first thing it requires is that there is optimal functioning and optimal quality of life. And the second thing is preservation of organs, which means that we have the ability to keep our organs going for a very long period of time. So there was a book by the name of Blue Zones. I'm sure you may have read the book, and it actually did research on areas of the world where people lived to be 100, and not just terrible 100, good 100 with a good quality of life. And so like Okinawa in Japan was one of the places they looked at. There was a place in I believe it was in France that they looked at. And so there was also a place in California that they looked at. And so when this research was done, they identified the reasons why these people lived on to be 100. So what did they do? They actually allowed preservation of organs. They use the organs in such a nice way. Like if you have a food processor, you use it, you clean it, you only use it for 2 minutes at a time, you don't use it a lot. Of course, the life of that food processor will be much, much, much longer than somebody who presses the button and sits there for like 10 minutes and then turns it off and doesn't even care where the food processor is sitting. So the health is about how do you preserve your organs for longevity and for them to be able to function for a long period of time. So health is not just the absence of mental symptoms or physical symptoms or whatever. It is about preservation, and it is about optimal functioning in every realm that you can think of, like social realm, and very importantly, the culmination of how would I know that I'm optimal health would be. And I think one of the things which nobody asks in medicine, I don't think a physician has ever asked a patient, are you happy? Because it's a very important question. You're happy. Okay, you have all the money and you can walk and you can play tennis, but are you happy? That's a very important question, because that is really the determinant of your spiritual health. And spiritual health plays a very, very important role in every kind of health. Like, do you have a purpose in life? Is there something in your life which drives you? And so this is what health is about. And these are the questions we never ask our patients. And our patients sometimes don't even expect it. And that's why they may not even tell us that I'm very unhappy. Like I have asked my patients these questions, are you happy? Because sometimes you could see that, you see the patient giving you all of these symptoms, and somehow you feel like there is something that is missing. There's a void because you can't put your finger on it. And then you say, are you happy? I mean, what's going on here, right? And so sometimes you will discover that everything that they're talking about has nothing to do with what they're talking about, because they themselves cannot figure out why do they feel such a big vacuum inside them. So I think that is how I would look at health.
Yeah, I mean that's fantastic. A fantastic overview, and it's so true. And the term that keeps coming to mind for me is medical gaslighting. And so, obviously on this show, we have talked about gaslighting quite a bit. So we know the term. But I think it can be really frustrating for people too when they are trying to, they feel a certain way, whether it's, mental, physical, whatever, and they go to seek help, and they go to seek help in the only avenues that they know how to seek help, and they're not getting anywhere, and they're actually being told, well, no, this isn't what you're struggling with, or like, this isn't a problem, or you're struggling with this because of something totally unrelated, and they don't move forward in any way. And I think specifically talking about this within the realm of trauma victims and how it affects people who have experienced trauma and are trying to work through it, but haven't necessarily made the connection between the physical, spiritual, mental part of it. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think you have absolutely nailed it, because I cannot tell you how many times, the problem is not the actual problem of the patient. The problem is the patient almost feels that they're crazy, because they have been to so many physicians that, and they have been told there's nothing wrong with you. And they have even been sent to basically psychiatrists saying that, maybe you have some anxiety and some depression. And the patient actually has chronic fatigue, or they have a chronic issue. For example, there is pain, but they can't seem to figure out the reason for it. And they have gone to every specialist on the face of the earth with their joint pains, aches, fatigue, and all the tests that we do in the conventional setting are negative, which is possible, because remember that the testing that we do in the conventional setting is very superficial. It's very structure related. Like, for example, if you do CAT scan, right? It's looking at the structure. Let's suppose somebody has joint pain. Okay. If you do the x-ray, it's normal. Does that mean the patient has joint pain? Yes. They could still have joint pain even though the x-ray is negative, or CAT scan is negative, or MRI is negative. You can even do a scope. They do arthroscopy, which is you put a scope inside the knee to see if you find anything. And that will still be negative, but that does not mean the patient does not have pain, because the pain is not coming from structural problem. Pain is coming from a functional problem. And a functional problem has to be there for 12 to 15 years before you will actually see structural issues coming on.
Wow.
So functional issues precede structural issues. Okay. And so what happens is that when you have a functional problem and all your tests are negative, now the physician, you have to remember, look, I have been trained as an internist, as a medicine, just like from medical school. Functional medicine came later in my life. So if you were a patient and you came to me with fatigue, and I would say all your tests are negative, now you have stumped me. Now, what am I supposed to tell you? Because you're saying I have all of these symptoms, and I'm looking at all my diagnostic boxes that I have been taught that they have to fit either hypothyroidism, or they should fit like anxiety, or they should fit depression, or they should fit rheumatological diseases. And I say, no, 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 no. Now, what am I supposed to do with you? So the last thing that is left is something must be wrong here. So they say, you must be anxious or you must be depressed. Now the patient is saying, yes, I am depressed, but I'm not depressed because I'm depressed. I'm depressed because I'm fatigued. It's the other way around. The doctor is saying, no, no, no. It is because you're depressed that you are fatigued. And so then what happens? So now at least there are some physicians who are compassionate enough to say, look, I don't know what's going on. And that's a great answer. I think there's nothing wrong. I have said this to so many people. Actually, I often say this like when I see them, I said, honestly, I don't know what's going on with you. I know there's something going on, but I don't know. I myself have to figure this out with you to know what's going on. But right now, I cannot tell you what's going on with you, right? And it's much better that you say, look, I don't know, but I am willing to either send you to a specialist or to see what we can do together. But if you tell the patient there's nothing wrong with you and you have to stop going from doctor to doctor, or it's psychosomatic, you're actually traumatizing the patient. Because now the patient is really traumatized. And I cannot tell you, we have traumatized so many people in the medical community because of how we have behaved with them by negating. So I had a woman who came to me who was put on oral contraceptives. After she started oral contraceptives, she started having vaginal pain. especially during her intercourse. So she goes to the GYN and says, look, I'm having this. She said, no, that's not from oral contraceptive. You can't say that. Because in medicine, we say you cannot say never and you cannot say always in medicine. Because what if this is the first patient with the side effect of vaginal pain from oral contraceptive, that this is actually a known side effect? The doctor may not know. I understand not every doctor will know every possible side effect. Understood, no problem, right? But you cannot tell the patient that, this is not even possible. And so this is one of the issues that we are facing, that when conventional medicine, is dealing with functional issues, then there are lots of limitations. And a lot of times, when we don't have physicians and other healthcare professionals who are compassionate, then they actually get traumatized by that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm like, if I hadn't gone through my own journey, I think I would be in tears right now, because I just resonate with so much of what you're saying, and it's my own personal experience. And I actually, it was crazy how validating going to a functional medicine practitioner was, because for literally 15 years, I've been hearing one thing, and the same thing from multiple doctors. And it was just like, we can't figure it out, so it must be this. And it turns out it wasn't that. And I wasn't crazy. But
nobody is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really jarring though to hear it. And so, especially when we talk about like stress being such a huge part of health. I mean, we collectively aren't talking about it enough, but I think it's starting to become more and more of our conversation. And so, you talk about calm, like stress is a huge part of that equation. So yeah, I appreciate your candor with all of that. Tia, do you want to hop in?
Yes. So, you answered the question that I was going to ask. I was going to ask you what questions can help get to the root cause or problems. But you talked about, doctors asking their patient, are you happy? Do you have purpose? And having compassion. But that took me to my next question. So now I want to ask you, what kind of, or is there any training available for doctors who are dealing with patients who are suffering from trauma? So for right now, I can go to my GYN, my regular physical doctor. I can even go to my children's doctor. I can take my children to their appointment and they will give me a list of questions. Do you want to say yes to any of these? And everything is referring to abuse. Well, if you're in a position where you're not comfortable answering those questions, or somebody just throws this list at you and you're like, you don't really care about me anyway, so I'm not going to invest, in that. It's what kind of training is available. I mean, no, you are in functional holistic healing, but that was a choice that you made. So what kind of training is there for doctors to be able to ask the right questions?
So I think this is $1 million question. And I'll tell you that I'm going to divert a little just so that you understand that when we're in the medical school, right, we are trained to be compassionate. Yes, we're not trained in trauma. Well, trauma is not really part of the course. So let's make sure that we are very clear that there isn't any formal training provided about trauma, or what does trauma mean, or how does it. I cannot tell you how many times I've detected trauma in my office and the patient said, is that really trauma? And you're like, yes, you have been traumatized. The patient like, oh, now I know what I feel like, why I feel the way I feel. So trauma is missed right, left, and center in medical setting because, first of all, nobody's trained in trauma. So I'm not going to go behind and go around the bush and try to explain why. I don't know why. I don't know why. I didn't create the curriculum, but the curriculum does not teach that. But the worst part is not that. The worst part is even the psychiatrists don't know how to detect trauma. So this is the worst case scenario. So, okay, this is the primary care physician. Now you're talking about psychiatrists. If the psychiatrists do not know how to detect trauma, then I don't know what to say. So that's one issue. So I will leave that alone and say, okay, you don't know what you don't know. I'll give you grace points for that. There is a bigger problem. The bigger problem is we all know depression. We are taught depression. We're taught anxiety, right? We know all that. We are taught compassion, like we are taught how to talk to the patients, how to kind of try to be like empathetic, all of that stuff in medical school. Now, in medical school, what happens is the patient comes and there's obviously a fake patient, and there's a, like I've been a faculty, so you're in the faculty and the patient is saying, I have this, that, and the medical student is trying to be empathetic and all of that stuff. And you have half an hour, you can as much 15 minutes. You have a long time to do whatever you want to do, okay? Now this medical student gets into residency, which is the final level of training. You complete medical school. Once you have residency, then you start practicing. Now you get into residency. Now you look at your schedule. One patient every 10 minutes. And then you have a preceptor that you also have to get to. Because the preceptor, you have to present your case and say, this is what I'm going to do. The preceptor have to agree. And you have a full panel of patients, okay, right now. Now, if you sit with the patient and you say, okay, so then you take the checklist. Let's suppose you don't give the checklist to the patient. And they say, well, this is the DSM-4 criteria. DSM-5 criteria for depression is the patient will say, I feel sad and it affects my life, etc., whatever. So now if he's going to say, okay, so do you see sadness? Does it affect your life? What's going on here? Because he's trying to fill the criteria real quick. So that if he fills the criteria, then he can go and tell the preceptor if there's depression or there is no depression, right? Now imagine the patient, he's thinking, what is going on here? Like, I mean, are you sad? Are you not? I mean, this is not a question which is a checkbox question, right?
Right, exactly.
But he only has 10 minutes. Now, you have to remember that this patient who's coming with depression also has diabetes and hypertension, which is a result of whatever is happening. But he has that. And he's on 5 medications. So the student is also supposed to go with the med list and make sure that it is a correct med list, because you don't want to have 2 different medications of the same class and God forbid the patient is in the hospital because you did not check the medication list. So he has to do that as well, or she has to do that as well, right? Now, this is the situation. That is the reality. Okay. In reality, how can you be compassionate if you have 10 minutes? I remember very vividly a time I was dealing with a woman who was divorced. She was going through a divorce. She was crying in my room. She is like, I'm worried that she's going to commit suicide or something like that, because she was so upset, I'm sitting in the room and we're having this discussion, and I'm trying to see what I want to do with her, because I was worried about giving her a prescription because that increases the risk, of suicide. And this woman is depressed, but she seems to be so badly depressed that she could do something, And I have a knock and another knock and a third knock. Dr. Ali, we have 2 patients waiting. Dr. Ali, I'm thinking, what am I supposed to do at this point in time? I cannot tell the student to leave the room and give her a prescription. I mean, I have to think through, because I need to provide some resources. I have to contact a therapist so that she can immediately talk to the therapist. And at that time, I asked myself, what the hell am I doing here? I mean, why did I become a physician? This is really not for me, because what am I doing? I was really upset, So I finished her and there were 3 patients. And of course, the patients are getting upset because they're like, I'm here 20 minutes. Doctor is not even seeing me. Of course, they're right, because they have taken time out of their schedule. They're hoping to be seen. It's already half an hour. They haven't even been taken into the room, and the doctor is not even coming out. So you can imagine that the model that you have, and why is the model that way? The model is that way because if you look at the power of physician, it's nothing. So just so that you know that so let's suppose you go in to see a patient as a physician and you see, the patient needs to change the diet, okay? And you say, I'm going to spend 30 minutes telling this patient what they should eat. I'm going to sit down and do my counseling. How much money do you think insurance is going to pay for that visit? Can you guess? Just guess. No, just come up with a number.
Well, I know what my copays are and what I
No, not copay. Look, copay is we only pay a small amount, but the insurance is supposed to add on to that, right? So what do you think the insurance pays this physician?
$100.
$33.
Oh my word.
Wow.
Yes. And the therapist, the poor therapist who sits the whole day listening to everybody who has depression and anxiety, which is a very difficult job because your energy is constantly being negatively affected. You have to disconnect at the end of the day. It's very hard. Honestly, I have a lot of respect for therapists because they do a very hard job. insurances, other insurances, that's why you see a lot of therapists don't take insurance. They're paying $45 and $50 for an hour of the therapist's time. People pay more than that for a haircut.
Yeah.
Okay. So now think about it. If this, on the other hand, if this doctor says, I'm going to give you 3 medication and 2 tests, okay, in 15 minutes time, how much will the insurance pay the physician? $130.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So I want you to think about, what are you incentivizing the physician to do? You are giving him 10 minutes, him or her 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And you're saying that the more medication you prescribe, the more tests you prescribe, the higher the complexity of the patient. So this is how the billing works. And the higher the complexity, the more you will get paid. Now you have to tell me, how do you plan to put compassion into that system? I don't know. I can't be compassionate in there. When I was burning out, I was so burnt out. I was losing my compassion for my patients. That's when I said, you know what, this is really not going anywhere with me, because, you are doing nights. So people are calling you during the nights. And then, the next morning, 8:30, you have to show up for a patient. Tell me about compassion at that point in time. So I think that the issue is not people don't know how to be compassionate or they have not been trained, but their role modeling is other physicians who they have seen running around like, crazy and quickly trying to do everything. And you have also been told you have this many minutes, and more productivity means seeing more patients. And I remember when I was in in the hospital setting, I had these physicians, like senior physicians, who would say, oh, I came at 7 o'clock and I was here till 8. And they're being proud about it. I'm thinking, oh my God, this guy is crazy. I would never want to come at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. So the worst part is there is no realization that you're not doing a service to yourself by being there for so long. You have no, you don't even have any idea of what work-life balance is. How do you plan to tell a patient about work-life balance? I had a patient of mine who saw a cardiologist. So she went and her cholesterol numbers went down, and she was really very proud. And she thought, now he's going to be telling her, wow, this is great. So he said that. He said, you did a great job. And wow, the statins are really working. And she goes, I'm not taking a statin. And he goes, what? She goes, yeah, I'm going to this physician and she took me off of the medication and now my blood pressure is under control, my cholesterol is fine, blah, blah. I said, oh, maybe I should go to the doctor too, because I'm on a number of medications. So she goes, yeah, you should see her, but she will tell you she's very strict about the diet and this and that. And she's like, oh, well, I think I'll stick with my medications. So you have to understand that, if the physician himself or herself is not open to lifestyle change, does not believe in that change, do you really expect that this person will counsel the patient to do things any different? Because he himself is taking like 6 medications. So he is doing what he believes in, and he believes in it because he's been trained in it. He's been told this is exactly what's the way to go. And this is one of the reasons why, and there are good physicians. Not everybody is bad. I have to make sure that we are very clear. It's not the majority, but there are people like that. And so one of the things that I'm doing is I'm in the process of writing a book for the patient as to how to find a physician, because I see everybody coming to my office. All my patients come and they complain about how terrible physicians have been or are and all of that stuff. And I hear them and I know it's true. But the problem is that they didn't even know how to filter out these people right off the bat. You get a list of physicians by your insurance company, and you're okay, get somebody. This is what we will cover. You pick up the phone, first available appointment. You're like, I'm desperate. I've got to go. And then you expect the person to do all that you want them to do, and the person doesn't want to do that, and now you're very upset about it. So I think that one of the purpose of this book is, if somebody wants to go into the functional side of things, what are the things they can do themselves, and then how do they find a team? Because if you're going to go to somebody who only knows how to work with a hammer, they will only work with a hammer. But you say, no, I don't want to use the hammer. The person says, what do you want me to do? I only know how to use the hammer. That's why we tell people that if you have a back pain and you go to a surgeon, what do you think the surgeon will tell you? Do surgery. And so I think that the problem is on both sides, and I think a lot of the problem is created by the insurance model and the pharmaceutical industry, because all the information. So the other thing you have to know, that where does the information comes to the physician? The information comes from these medical journals that are absolutely 100% funded by pharmaceutical industry. So, and there is a pharma app that comes, oh, there's a new study, $1 million study, which shows X, Y, and Z. So they said, yeah, the study shows it, we're going to use it. But the problem is that that study that was done for $1 million, that study will never be replicated to look at meditation, to look at yoga, to look at Tai Chi. Why? Because who has $1 million to spend for something that cannot be sold? I mean, can you sell it? I mean, you cannot brand meditation. So you will never get that study. So if a patient says, can I go to acupuncturist? The physician is like, I don't think it's going to work. Why don't you just take a pill? I mean, we have studies which show that works. Who knows acupuncture works or does not work? Because there's actually data on acupuncture. We actually have studies on acupuncture. But the question is, did this physician have access to those studies? Did those studies get published in the journals that he is reading? So when I initially, my journey into functional medicine was after I was depressed myself, and so when I first, the first thing I did, my first school was actually Mass General has Benson Henry Institute, and they actually, there's the Benson Henry technique. And so when I first enrolled myself in, I was actually ashamed of myself as a physician, because the amount of literature that they put out on mindfulness, it was like mind blowing. I couldn't believe that I had not ever read anything like that. I mean, they had every reason to show how the mind affects every single part of the body. But I didn't know that, and so it was really eye-opening to see that I didn't know so much. And that's when I started questioning that whatever I've studied, I mean, is it all completely out? I mean, what's wrong with it? So at that point in time, I started questioning my own medical school, stuff that I had studied, and that's when I was like, no, this is not giving me any answers. And that was the first time I started critically questioning everything that I had learned. But had it not been that, I would be doing exactly what everybody else is doing.
Wow. And when will your book be available, Dr. Nadia?
Well, it's in the editing phase.
Okay.
And you
awesome.
know that. So yes, so hopefully soon.
Okay, great.
I love to hear that you're doing it. I mean, you just opened so many doors that I want to walk through, and I feel like we could sit here and talk for 5 hours. But I think what's kind of coming to mind as you walked through that whole process was, obviously the system is not set up to work for any particular person. It's not set up to work for patients, and it's not set up to work for doctors either. It's set up to work for an industrial complex, multiple industrial complexes. Shocking. But so what is actually coming to mind, though, then, is that how many doctors are there themselves experiencing trauma just in their practice and in the way that they are forced to practice. And again, not being trauma informed or trauma trained, not even realizing that is what is happening to them.
So that's an excellent question. So there's one physician who commits suicide every single day. In case if you didn't know, every day. Because there was a survey, around 60% of physicians basically are burned out. And these are the people we're expecting compassion from, not happening. And this is also where a lot of medical errors happen, because the physicians are so burnt out, because they are part of a system where they have literally no control. And to be honest with you, I was burnt out and I didn't know. I didn't know that I was burnt out. I just knew that I was getting very frustrated, very irritated. And when I was coming home, you drop a pin, I'm going to be like shouting and yelling, like, what's going on? Da, 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 da. You know, and later on, I'd feel so bad. I'd be like, why was I shouting? What was there to shout about? Like, I mean, what's wrong with me, you know? And so, you know, it took me a long time to even realize that I was burnt out. Actually, there was a presentation that happened in the hospital on burnout. And I was sitting in it, I was thinking, oh my God, I have all of these things. Holy cow, I am burnt out. So it's very interesting that you don't, now the awareness is much more than before. Like when I was, you know, I was working, burnout was not really something that people even talked about. Now we talk about burnout a lot. The worst part is that, you know, when you tell them, like everybody knows physicians are burnt out. And if you see the way you can kind of see how it's affecting the situation is you will see doctors jumping ship all the time. I had a patient who saw one doctor once. 3 months later, the woman had moved. Then she saw the second one. 6 months later, after 2 appointments, that one had moved, you know. And so she's like, you know, I've seen 3 doctors, and every time because she's a complex patient, she said, every time I tell my whole story, only to know the physician actually vanishes after 6 months, you know. So then what happens that they start to jump ship because they're burnt out. But the problem is that it is not about a particular organization. It's everybody's functioning the same because everybody is in the same boat. That's the problem. And so when this burnout is happening, these physicians are committing suicide. When you ask them to change anything, you know what the solutions are being given? So one of the societies said, one of the recommendations of society came and said, you know, doctors should learn how to do mindfulness, mind-body techniques. It's not about a lack of mind-body techniques that is causing the burnout. You know, it is what's happening in the room that's causing burnout, because even the physician knows that they are unsatisfied with the encounter with the patient. Who will be satisfied with an encounter with the patient if you have a depressed and anxious patient, and instead of, you know, putting a hand on their shoulder and allowing them to communicate, you are telling them, look, this is all I can do, can I get to the next patient? It's not. So remember that, you know, in healing, it's like a marriage. You know, 2 people win together and 2 people lose together. It's not like one person win and one person loses. You know, if there are 2 people in the room, a patient and a doctor, if the patient is disappointed, the doctor is as much disappointed, because you know that you are not connecting at that level with the patient that you should. You know, and so when I do my functional medicine and I connect with my patients, I feel so happy. At the end of the day, I am excited. Every day I'm like, I want to go because I am making this difference. And my patient says, I feel so much better talking to you. I feel like I have hope. And that gives me hope. You know, so it's a 2-way street. Just because if a patient will be disappointed, it is not possible that the physician is going to be extremely happy about the encounter. And how many times will you disappoint yourself till you start seeing that negativity actually, you're going to spill it out into the people around you? And that's when you see that, you know, that is one of the reasons why we have lost respect. You know, people don't respect physicians the way they used to at one point in time. They don't believe physicians as much they used to one point in time. They are now questioning everything. And that was very clear when COVID happened. You know, how the vaccines were questioned, you know, how the, you know, medications, Paxlovid was questioned, you know. So because when they don't see that their needs are being met, then they are going to question the person in front of them, you know. And that's precisely what's happening. Unfortunately, everybody doesn't know what's happening behind the scene. They only see the encounter. They don't see everything else around, going on around them. And I think that is where the problem is. And functional medicine is not being promoted by the system. It's being promoted by patients who are now outrightly saying, we don't want to have a medication. We're done with it. And so it's really a war against the system that is being waged by a group of people. And we have to see where this goes, because this is a very this is a group of people with very limited resources against a very, very, very resourceful group.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen.
It's really difficult because, when we talk about trauma-informed care, and you've already alluded to the fact that there are psychiatrists that don't have training in trauma-informed care. There are so many people with so many limited resources. I'm very fortunate that I can afford to go pay out of pocket to a functional medicine doctor and try different modalities. There are a lot of people that can't afford to do that can only go through their insurance because it's the only way that they're able to pay for medical care. And unfortunately have bad experiences, and so they kind of get frustrated and stop going. What would you say to people that are really limited in their access or their resources with like alternative care or alternative modalities? What are things that they can be doing to try and help themselves, even, outside of the medical space, but just in general?
And so that is precisely why I'm writing the book, because I have heard this question so many times. And to be honest with you, you're 100% right that functional medicine is so expensive that even functional physicians will say, look, I can't afford to see a functional physician because it's so expensive, all of this out of pocket expenses that are there. So I think that, there are lots of things people can do. Like I said, that, we are 99% energy, right? So you want to start with that. You want to start with, the basics. What are the basics? What is going on in your head? That's the first thing that you have to ask yourself. How do you feel inside you? Are you happy? Do you have a purpose? Do you feel angry? Do you feel frustrated? What is your coping strategy to stress? That is the most important area that they can deal with. The second thing is that, what am I putting in my body? And when I say putting in, I don't just mean food, because every time we talk about the people think it's to do with food. No, it's to do with what kind of makeup you're putting on your body. It's what kind of detergent you're using to wash your dishes, everything that can possibly go inside you. What kind of toxins are you exposing yourself to? We often don't see ourselves as part of the earth. When we say that we're destroying earth, we think we're destroying earth, something outside. We are part of the earth. We are also destroying ourselves. It's not just the earth that we are destroying, but we see ourselves as separate. And so the other part is, how do we live harmoniously with where we are living? So I have a lot of people now saying, I'm going to grow my own garden, I'm going to grow my own vegetable, and that's wonderful. And the way you care for your plants, because there's an energy connection. You connect with the energy of what you're eating. Like, if somebody cooks, so when a mom cooks and you get food from outside, there's a big difference. The energy that she has cooked the food with is reflected in that food. And so we have to understand the energy connection, And so I think that when you are looking at what you put inside you, then you also have to ask about your connection with what's going on around you. How is your connection with the people around you? How's your connection with the plants around you? How's your connection with the neighbors around you? Because that impacts you. You don't need to see a doctor for all of these things, right? Hopefully. And then we do things like, one of the things that we do in our practice, we do grocery tours, which is it's not very expensive, like $75, because we say, okay, the first thing is food. So what do you need to put in your grocery basket, And so simple things like that can be done, where you are like, okay, a physical activity, how do you get yourself out there and you sweat? I mean, sweating is very helpful. So how do you sweat? What kind of mind-body techniques do you use in your life, to disconnect? Because disconnect is very important. The pace of our lives are faster than what we were genetically supposed to be at. So if you look at the animal, the way you can look at any animal, and you will see, when they see the sun, they get up. When the sun goes down, they go to sleep. Only man is the only, animal who does not follow any rules, does whatever he or she feels like, opposes all kinds of natural phenomena, and then complains about being sick. I mean, think about it. And so this is a problem, that are you aligned with nature, and if you look at, the stress of what stress were we supposed to have, like, every animal goes through stress, right? So there is a stress of finding food. Okay, there is stress of protecting against predators, and there's stress of finding the right mate, and there are lots of fights with regards to that, and we all know all about those fights. Those were the three stresses we were supposed to have. But what are stresses? Computer, billing. These are not the stresses that we were supposed to face, because these are constant stressors. Those stressors that we were supposed to have genetically were supposed to be at a point in time. So when you are hungry, you look for food. Once you get food, stress is over. When you need to protect yourself, you run. So you have stress. Once you are saved, stress is over. When you want to find a mate, you are stressed out. Once you find the mate, stress is over. But our stresses don't stop at all. I mean, you are thinking about, the bills you have to pay, and then this thing is not working, and that thing needs to be fixed, and somebody needs to be picked up from somewhere, and the car is not working. I mean, there's a non-stop. So there is no stop to the stress. So how do you disconnect? Because if you're not going to disconnect, it's like a food processor which is running for 24 hours. Then you're complaining the food processor is not working, or it's giving problems and stuff like that. So how do you disconnect at the end of the day? And so I think that, there are very, very, very basic things which, if we can do, a lot of our problems will not be there. Not all problems will go away, but a lot of them will go away. And we will be able to prevent a lot of things. But you have to start thinking on those lines, and that everybody can do.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've been so wonderful to talk to, and I love this so much, but I want to turn it over to Tia for any other questions she has.
Well, I did have a couple questions, but you answered them as you were speaking.
I'm glad I did that.
So you are a very good interviewee. So I think the last thing that I will ask is for you to give our viewers, to give our listeners what you would deem to be just that most important thing to walk away with from this conversation on tonight. We definitely want you to let us know when your book is done, so we can let Love Bay know. But if you could just sum it up in a few words, what would you want everyone to walk away with on tonight?
I think one thing that I will say is the most important thing that I want to emphasize, and I think that one of the biggest issues with the current system is that the current system makes us feel very helpless. Like when you're given a medication, you depend on the medication, you need a doctor, you have to depend on a doctor. Like you almost like you feel like you have no power. You're made to feel very powerless, And I think that is where, a lot of people, when they feel very powerless, they literally freeze. And they start doubting their own ability to do anything. And so this is what I would say, that the most important thing to understand is that we have a lot of power. We have the power to heal ourselves. And we have to understand that healing is a process. So, okay, if you have power, let's suppose you have power, you use the power to do something and you fall. That doesn't make you powerless. It simply makes you more experienced to know where should you not put your power. So then you have to go for something else. So I think that two things. First, you have to understand that human beings have an innate ability to heal themselves. We actually carry that ability. And if we didn't have that ability, we wouldn't have survived till now, because there was times there were no physicians, there was no medicine, no medications, no procedures, no nothing. And we survived all of that, right? And so we have an innate ability to heal ourselves. I'm not saying that a physician cannot be helpful. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that there's a lot we can do to help ourselves. So that's the first and foremost thing to understand, because you need to take the power. The moment you feel powerful, that is when you make decisions which are actually going to be more effective at helping yourself. So when I am powerful and I see a physician, then I'm going to not go to the physician as, oh my God, please help me. I'd say, I want you to help me, but here is what I want. Because I am deploying you as part of my team to do the job that I want to be done. Instead of like, okay, what do you want me to do? No, that is you giving the power away. You're saying, okay, you tell me what to do. So basically, you have no power. So if I'm powerful and I'm getting somebody in my team, I would say, look, I'm going to tell you exactly what my goals are and what processes I want. This is how I want you to go about. And this is your expertise will come here, but here is what I would like to achieve. And here are some of the things which work for me. Here's what does not work for me. And so when you have that power, then the team that you're going to get will know exactly what you want, when you want it, how you want it. That would also mean that when you have power, then the people around you, you will select who do you want to be part of your tribe. Do you want somebody who constantly brings negativity in your tribe? You'll say, no, 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 I don't want this person as part of my team. No, this person has to go. Let me bring somebody who inspires me. Let me bring somebody who actually appreciates me, right? So health, requires a tribe, because we are human beings are tribal creatures. Mm-hmm. We were born in tribes. We cannot live independently. So this whole notion of independence is flawed. Like how everybody wants to be independent. But you cannot be independent. Nobody can be independent. Because we are not born to be independent. We are born to be with each other. So how do you, when you're powerful, you create a very powerful tribe that has the same values, that thinks the same way, that actually comes together, appreciates each other and move forward. And this is particularly important when you are looking into healing, because healing happens in a context. Healing does not happen in isolation. So when you're saying that you want to heal yourself and you're getting the toxins out of your system, or you're taking negative people out of your system, you need positive people too. You need nutrients too. You also need good botanicals. So it's not just about removing. It's also having the right things around you and creating the right context. And the other very important thing I would say is that it's not just about having a context. It's also about expanding that context. Because remember, we are connected to everybody else, irrespective of they agree with us or they don't agree with us. So if you're living in a community where 5 people are spraying pesticides and 5 people are not, the 5 people that are not will still be affected by the 5 people who are spraying, because we cannot tell the air not to transmit the pesticide from one place to another place. And so we have to expand that circle, not by fighting, but by empathy, because we can do that. So when we have a group of people, then we can help other people understand in an empathetic manner. Because at the end of the day, I think even the people who are not necessarily on our side, they're not bad people. They think that the interests are opposite to ours. And the truth is that's not true. Because we're not saying that we're going to throw all medications into the ocean, or we're not going to have any procedures. There's a place for medication. There's a place for procedure. But we have to make sure that the patient comes first instead of the medication or the procedure coming first. And I think that is what we have to do. We have to create a group. We have to create a context where everybody knows that they have a place. But at the end, the important thing is the patient always will come first. And their needs will always come first. And this is how the system is supposed to be designed, So we have a lot of power. But the question is, do we feel that? Are we using it the way we are supposed to? That is the key.
But thank you so much, Dr. Nadia. We really appreciate you being here with us on this evening. And we are just at the hour. So, Jen, I'm going to ask you for your final thoughts on tonight before we say goodbye to Left Bay for tonight.
Oh man, I'm really thrilled to have been able to have this conversation with you, Dr. Nadia. I think that, wellness is such a huge part of the human equation, and, you know, understanding how we really do have to advocate for ourselves. At the end of the day, you know, we have to understand that we have the power to do it, but it's also our responsibility to do it, I think is really important. And so, yeah, I appreciate that, and definitely echo the calls to just find, you know, try different things, find what works, and, you know, don't be afraid to express what you need.
Thank you, Jen. I was going to say amen. Like,
amen.
I just, you know, I'm just love it. You know, I'm in church all the time. But thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for your final thoughts. Thank you again, Dr. Nadia, for being here with us. Love Bay, if you want to catch up on previous episodes from our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. We thank you so much for joining Suffering in Silence with Evangelist Tia. Thank you for being here with our co-host, Jennifer Peterkin, and again, Dr. Nadia Ali. We are here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay, we want you to continue to remember that we are rising out of the ashes together. Good evening.
Good evening.